and their families. Lord, we ask that you will guide our decisions today, that you will show us what it is that you want us to see in our budget process. And God, we thank you, dear Lord, for giving us not only decision-making power, but then also showing us how to make the right decision. Lord, we thank you for this. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Please repeat with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. To wait for Madam Secretary to come back into the room. As we wait for her, however, I would like to allow the floor to our school board member, Mr. Patrick Moore.
Thank you, President Lanus. As many of you have seen, well, I am very passionate about my mission on the school board to improve the education of our students, improve our openness and transparency to the public, and get us a fair, good, balanced budget. And I will remain passionate, as I believe all my colleagues are passionate about the mission that we've been called upon to perform for our kids. Last Thursday, I let my passions run away from me and my frustrations run away from me a little bit, and I used some inappropriate language in what I intended as a private conversation with one of my colleagues. And I used language that we would certainly not want our children in school uttering on the school campus, and I should not have uttered them here, as several teachers have emailed me today to call me on the carpet for. You're never too old to be called on the carpet by a teacher for inappropriate language in an inappropriate place. And so I'd like to apologize to my colleagues, the superintendent and the staff, and the public for my inappropriate use of language last week. And thank everybody for their patience with me as I assure that I won't make a similar mistake again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, School Board Member Martin. And before I begin, I'd like to say one thing I want us all to walk away with is that we're all human. Everybody have moments. And I appreciate you, and I'm sure our board appreciates you for stepping into this and giving that speech that you just gave. But what I will also say is that your passion for this budget and making sure this process goes through is absolutely commendable. And your work on this board is also commendable. And I want to thank you personally for going out to our retirees and going to speak on our behalf, this board, to make sure we sent them off the right way. So thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Secretary, please call. Roll call.
District 2, President Lannis.
Present.
District 3, Vice President Powell.
Present.
District 1, Mr. Blue. Here. District 4, Ms. Stewart.
Present.
District 5, Mr. Lewis.
Here.
District 6, Mr. Russ.
Present.
District 7, Mr. Gode.
Here.
District 8, Ms. Kennison.
Here.
District 9, Mr. Martin.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time now, I'd like to ask Mr. Crochet, as well as Ms. Smith, if needed, to come up for the budget presentation before we entertain a motion for item B1.
Good evening, members of the board. Tonight, I want to present to you the two remaining versions of the 22-23 general fund budget. The budget law requires a proper notice and that the budget be available for public inspection. Right now, the proposal from administration is to have that inspection available on July 17th and a budget hearing and adoption on the 31st. The budget can be amended at any point in time if there are things in there that should be added and or deleted. The budget law requires budget adoption no later than September 15th by budget law. The Louisiana Department of Education requires submission to their office by September 30th. The district is currently operating under the 22-23 salary schedule and 50% of the prior year budget as required by the budget law. The summary of the budget changes. This has not changed since May 17th, and these are those changes. No school-based or classroom personnel have been made. Some administrative staffing changes have been made to executive directors, chiefs, and community liaisons. Contract changes were for junior achievement, $1 million addition to the HES contract, and NIET will be funded through the Reimagine grant. This is a summary of the proposed version 4B budget updates. These changes are not included in version 2. There have been no changes to version 2. As you can see, there's a whole wide range of items here, including tutoring, professional development, stipends, workforce development enhancement, and a $1,000 stipend for certain employees that may not have been eligible otherwise for the stipend. This slide, the summary of expenditures by category, provides a different lens to look at how the general fund budget is broken down, comparing version 2 and version 4B. You can see, reading on the left-hand side, the categories are academics, charters, cleanliness, operations, safety, teacher stipend. And all of these categories are broken down by personnel and non-personnel. One thing to note is that there are obviously a lot of personnel costs, especially in academics. This is the fund balance history over the last 5 years, and this balance has grown. But one thing to keep in mind with this balance is as the budget grows, the percentage that it takes, it may be we're experiencing inflation right now, so we have to keep that in mind. Everybody's aware of that. So the next thing we have is our general fund financial summary, comparing version 2 and the revised version 4. I'd like to call your attention to the middle part where it says over, under expenditures. Currently proposed in version 2, there's a $1.1 million operating gain as opposed to a $15.5 million operating deficit for version 4B. Version 2 summary. Version 2 has not changed, as I previously mentioned, is a one-time $2,000 stipend to all district employee groups below the director level. This slide right here illustrates who would not be eligible for that. The funding sources for version 2 are Proposition 1, 2, and Child Nutrition will be responsible for funding their employees, and Proposition 3 will fund the remaining employees. Version 2 balances and considerations. There's a projected excess of expenditures over revenue over expenditures of 1.1 million, as I previously mentioned. That would leave us a projected fund balance of 112.4 million. And the consideration is it would allow the district to provide an equitable stipend to all employees while providing some time to review or determine a permanent funding source and or reduction in expenditures to fund a sustainable raise. Version 4 is a 3-year plan to incrementally increase employee salaries. In year 1, certified personnel will be provided a $4,000 stipend, and non-certified personnel will be provided a $2,000 stipend. And the employees not included are listed on this slide. The funding sources for version 4, general fund employees will be split between general fund and Proposition 3. Grant-funded employees will be funded at the entire amount by Proposition 3. And Proposition 1 and 2 and child nutrition employees will fund the entire amount of those stipends. Version 4, balances in consideration. As previously mentioned, it's a projected operating deficit of $15.5 million, projected fund balance $101.8 million. This again would allow the district to provide an equitable stipend to all employees. Wouldn't become a permanent raise until 25-26 fiscal year, and would allow the district time to look for a sustainable funding source and/or reduction in expenditures. Opportunities within the district. Every 4 years, the assessor for East Baton Rouge Parish reassesses property taxes, and the next assessment is due in 2024. Historically, in 2020, that generated $10 million extra in property tax revenue for the district. 2016, that was $5 million. Other opportunities could be for the sale and/or lease of vacant buildings, such as Park or Banks Elementary. School consolidation. It's estimated that the district could save on the elementary schools about $500,000 a year for this, and reduction in operating costs. Continued evaluation of underperforming charters, and streamlining of academic programs such as Pathways for Bright Futures. That's it. Questions?
Thank you. First up in the queue, we have School Board Member Patrick Martin.
Thank you. The language in the summary of version 2 talks about a stipend, and the language in version 4 talks about a supplement to salaries. But as I read it, it seems to be that version 4 is in fact for this coming fiscal year, the budget we're actually voting on, is just a one-time stipend, in fact. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Supplement and stipend have been used interchangeably before.
Okay. So then, from an economics perspective, vis-a-vis the salary issues or the stipend issues, version 2 is a $2,000 across-the-board stipend to both certified and non-certified personnel. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And version 4 is a $4,000 one-time stipend for certified personnel and a $2,000 one-time stipend for non-certified personnel.
Right.
Okay. And then the other significant difference is there's been some additional funding added into, over and above the salary increase added into version 4, but not to version 2, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Shamlin, from a legal perspective, we can only vote on the budget and commit ourselves to a budget one fiscal year at a time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, notwithstanding language in the narrative summary of the budget presented for version 4, option 4, that says we're committed to these things, these raises, these additional stipends, whatever, over the next 3 years, that language isn't binding on us next year in any way legally, correct?
That's correct. The board would have to approve a budget to accomplish specifically those things in the next fiscal year.
Thank you. So, colleagues, my concern is, in the 6 months that the new board members have been on here, we've had many conversations and many criticisms from the public and many questions over what was promised and when. We have not had the opportunity to really do a full analysis of all the budget problems that we're going to be facing over the next 3 years. And so I am very leery and see no benefit, frankly, to making commitments that aren't actually legally binding, that would hamstring us in figuring out how we deal with the multiple challenges of the loss of ESSER funding and other issues that are going to be facing us as we move forward, the need to probably spend more on security, metrics and evaluations for a variety of things and things like that. So I'm uncomfortable making kind of a political, non-binding, non-legal commitment to things that we can't actually commit to right now and haven't had the time to properly analyze and vet. So I'm going to urge that at the end of the day, when we approve the budget at our special meeting at the end of this month, that we not include in that budget whatever else the result of the actual numbers, that we not include in that budget any language regarding a commitment, a multi-year commitment, because I don't think that we can make that commitment responsibly right now. That said, on terms of the financial issues associated with this, I am willing to provide our teachers and our staff a larger stipend at this point, and so I prefer the amounts that are established for that in version 4. I've got some concerns over the last minute addition of these additional dollars. Some of those I think are valuable. Some of those may not be. We haven't had time to really discuss them or analyze them. And I think as a point that Mr. Goday and others made last week, we're not absolutely set in stone. We can amend things into this budget over time. So I would hope that the budget we adopt, not commit us to any of that, but that we have time to continue analyzing those issues, which we can, particularly as they relate to contracts, right, for support services, that's easy enough to add back in. And finally, what I would hope that as we continue to work towards final passage of a budget is I think we need to continue giving more consideration to some of the potential reductions in personnel that we discussed last week, right? I think that we probably should reconsider getting rid of some assistant principals and stuff like that at a time when we're worried about not having enough staff on site at a school to monitor recess and things like that. So I would encourage everybody to also keep that in mind as we make final tweaks to this. But on the whole, with those caveats, I support version 4. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, that's 4B? Okay. I just want to say for the record, I'm sorry. Gotcha. All right, next in the queue, we have School Board Member School Member Michael Goday.
Thank you, President Lannis. Just a couple of quick questions. In option 4B, Mr. Crochet, it says here in the comparison that we have, this option provides staff not included in the pay increase who have worked in EBR for 20 or more years with one-time stipend of $1,000 for their service, da-da-da-da-da-da. Who does that apply to, and how many people, and what's the cost of that?
Mr. Crochet, if you need me to add some additional comments to that, I can.
Okay, I do know the cost is $60,000. Ms. Lopez provided that to me. I don't know the exact number, but I'm assuming it's 60.
So, Ms. Smith, can you give some more context?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. So this additional stipend will be applicable to those individuals who are not included in the pay increase, which are directors and above. And so we're looking at district-wide about 82 people, but they must meet the standard of 20 plus years of service. Yesterday, in a preliminary review, Ms. Lopez identified around 55 to 60 people.
Okay.
And so that's why we allocated $60,000 to that one-time increase.
Thank you. Also, my question, because I didn't have time to go through in detail, but from 4A to 4B, the cost went up about $6 million. Could you just, in broad categories, talk about what is in that increase? Ms. Smith, go ahead.
Okay. Yes. So there are some contracts that we are proposing to be added to the budget that will help us, will support academic support for schools, workforce development. And so roughly that's the difference in the cost between 4A and 4B. And also the additional dollars that we are projecting for the pay increases, adding the additional personnel for the one-time stipend.
Do you know offhand what contracts those are?
Yes, we BRIC. So on page.
Oh, it's on there?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
So it's BRIC, Studyville, Arbinger, with our strategic planning. Also, we had an additional.
okay.
Yes, we actually, I don't see it listed here, but you'll hear it.
I have it, okay.
It's $200 for additional school aid, classroom resources for teachers, and things of that nature.
Okay.
So that was the difference in the cost change.
Board Member Martin's teacher can slap me on the wrist for not paying attention during the, during the presentation. I'm sorry. Okay, so all of these would come up individually for approval or not approval at the time. Just being in the budget doesn't mean they're automatically approved.
Yes, it will still have to come before you guys as a board for contract approval.
Okay, because that's another thing. Not only can we amend the budget, you don't necessarily have to approve every contract that's in the budget.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the other thing I would say is I totally agree with Board Member Martin's views on putting in comments about future budgets and future plans. I think it's important for us to have a plan, but I don't think that that necessarily needs to be in the written verbiage of the budget, because we can't pass a 2 and 3 year budget. I saw where the I think it was the governor of Wisconsin passed by his line item veto, made a 400-year budget for school. He really did, but we can only do 1 year at a time. So I agree. I think those are our plans and those are our intentions. And if financially we have the ability to do that, that's how we plan on going about doing it. But I think that needs to be in a plan section, not in the verbiage of the budget. So I fully agree with my colleague, Board Member Martin. Thank you.
Thank you. Really good comments. Thank you, School Board Member Gode. Next, we have School Board Member Nathan Russ.
Thank you, President Lannis. Some of the things I would like to ask for specifically, going back to Mr. Gode's comment on the summary of version 4B budget updates, I do appreciate the comprehensive list of what those items are. As we were just sent this updated about 3:35 yesterday afternoon, I haven't had the opportunity to go through the entire budget and find out what is the sum of each of these contracts or other changes. Some of these are not contracts. So I would like to request to the administration if you could send me with each of these items the total budgeted amount, and please send that to me by tomorrow first thing if possible. So I would have time to look into these and understand what they are. I agree with some of the sentiments that have been said so far in that I also agree with 4B's provision for compensation, but I do have some concerns around a lot of these last minute additions to the actual amount of money that we're going to be spending. And so I have some questions around that. Some of these I agree with, some of these I may not, and I may need some explanation and development on that. Outside of that, something that I asked for 2 meetings ago as we're going through these budgets was for the different versions, and now we're down to 2, and hopefully one is chosen tonight. There's a breakdown on the funding sources for compensation, and something I asked Ms. Lopez for was the impact on the different funds that will be drawn from. So for general fund, Proposition 2, Proposition 3, I would like to understand what is that total amount we're drawing from each of those funds, and then what is the impact on those funds after having done so. So that's also a piece of information I would like to please receive tomorrow, so I can have further understanding around the decisions being made. Outside of that, I have further questions and concerns around our budget. I'm going to provide those to our board leadership and superintendent with the hopes that we can have some impact on this budget before we publish what we would consider a final budget to the public to be ratified by the end of the month, in all hopes that we can do so. So I hope that it will be heard and implemented and have a chance to get this done. Thanks.
Thank you, School Board Member Nathan Russ. Next, we have School Board Member Coach Lewis.
Thank you, President Lannis. Couple questions, and I'll try to move through pretty quick. First of all, we sat here last week, and we talked about version 2 and version 4. But we turn around 72 hours before we're supposed to decide, and another whole list of stuff crops up for version 4B that were not applied to the sheet opposite of version 2. So if we're going to compare apples to apples, we need to see apples next to apples. We don't need to see blank spaces with just a lot of definition for what it would do for version 4. So that's not transparency in my world. It actually smells fishy in my world. So I would hope that Mr. Russ gets what he asked for, because if we've got $5.7 million worth of contracts and things of that sort, why can't we take $5.7 million and pay teachers? Stipends, salaries. So that's the thing that troubles me about the late additions to version 4. $5.7 million, but what about 15 VPs that have gotten their pink slip? What about people we can't pay? Because we're in, I guess, a budget crisis may be the word to describe it. But you take a VP off of a campus, especially a high-need campus. Now you severely handicapped that principal. And we're removing deans. So let's say we don't have a VP and we don't have a dean at a high-risk school. You're asking for chaos. Pay teachers, use the $5.7 million to improve the education level of the kids in this district. Because I'm not sitting up here to win favors and make friends. I'm sitting up here to move this district forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach Lewis. Next, we have School Board Member Ms. Carla Powell Lewis.
Okay, I have a question. I'm not sure who needs to answer it, but as I look at the summary for version 4B, and we have some items, some contracts that could possibly be added. I'm looking at Baton Rouge Youth Coalition, tutoring services. I also see 100 Black Men mentoring and tutoring services. Are those two different types of programs? And if so, could you share some detail?
Yes, Vice President Powell. They're two different organizations. BREC helps with development around college counseling, getting kids persistently ready as they go through high schools, and then the 100 Black Men portion, which is a different organization, helps with tutoring services and with Black males in high needs areas.
Can I give a point of information? I'm sorry, Madam Vice President. I wanted to clarify. The item that you see that surrounds 100 Black Men, that's not for tutoring services. In fact, the state just mandated that we have to do financial literacy. So that was for financial literacy, and it's only going to take care of material costs. So it doesn't pay for any salaries or anything like that. It just helps to buy the materials so that those things can be implemented inside of several of the schools in North Baton Rouge. I just want to give clarity around that.
If I could just add to that too, what President Lyons, we wanted to, because the state made that requirement, with our partners, there were two partners we were going to work with for financial literacy, 100 Black Men and also Junior Achievement, which also works with that as well.
So now Junior Achievement could possibly be included in this list?
It's actually already in that, yeah.
Perfect. Okay. My next question was in regards to with option 2 or with version 2. If you could share with us, will there be, I guess, any funds left over in the general fund? I know that we've talked about these two different proposals, and one kind of leaving more of a minus than the other. I'm just curious to know with what has been proposed for version 2, will there be funds left over?
Yes, the projection is that you will have an operating excess revenue over expense of $1.1 million. So that will increase the fund balance potentially by $1.1 million.
Okay, and we've already established that our fund balance, we are over what we require or what we prefer to have within our fund balance, correct?
Yes, the board policy is a goal of 15% of revenues, and the state has a
7.5.
7.5, what they consider excellent. And so the 15% is also a recommendation by GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, and it's pretty much about 2 months of operating expenses.
Okay, thank you. So the reason why I was asking that to my colleagues, I just wanted to share, so, when we consider version 2, there is more funds available that we can possibly use for these contracts that are listed here in version 4B. And so if we were to operate in a safe space, then it allows us to be able to visit any of these contracts that we like and still not take too much out of our budget. So that were my questions. The reason why I asked about Baton Rouge Youth Coalition, 100 Black Men, is because, number one, I am a fan of both of their work, but I wanted to make sure that they are used in proper context. But at the same time, is it possible for us to consider these contracts that are listed here under version 4B, is it possible to consider those once we have taken care of the business that is in regards to version 2? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Next, we have School Board Member Katie Kennison.
Thank you. I'd like to echo all the things that Coach Lewis said, everything that he said. And also, I'd like to issue some apologies. First, to the employees who reached out and asked for the meetings to be after business hours just a week ago, and that sentiment was echoed by me and others to not do what we're doing right now and have a 4 o'clock meeting. So sorry to the employees who can't be here. Also, I'd like to apologize to the 160 employees who received letters of possible termination. When we started talking about the budget in May, the superintendent was instructed by myself and multiple other board members to make cuts at the central office level and of contracts. That was it. Requests were ignored, obviously. I'd like to also apologize to all 6,000 employees who were promised raises this year. There was never a plan. There's still not a plan. We don't have the money to do it. I asked for a plan months ago, and requests, again, ignored. I'd like to issue further apologies if option 4, whether it's A or B, I can't keep track, passes. The promises for increased salaries or stipends or whatever you would like to call it past next year are empty promises. We don't have a plan for sustainability. We don't. Talking about consolidating schools and whatnot, there's a fallacy in that, and every time we close a school, we move from a location, we have to offer it to charters first. So that being a money-making opportunity for the district is false. Also, after next year, ESSER will be ending, so that's another added bunch of money that we have to come up with that we do not have a plan for. So for plan 4A, 4B, it's not sustainable. It's not safe. It's not responsible. I'd also like to issue future apologies to all the business leaders in Baton Rouge and around the country who are profiting from partnerships with the district. Pardon me, I'm going to read from here. I noticed last week that a lot of the individuals who came up to speak on the superintendent's behalf were not educators, parents, or staff. They were folks in the community who are here to make money. There's a river of less than savory intentions flowing under this building and throughout the city, a river that is, at its core, thriving off of marginalizing disadvantaged people, and in this case specifically, disadvantaged young people. It's clear if you pay attention. I issue these future apologies because one day, the vision for this district is going to shift away from business partnerships, away from private interest groups, and away from corrupt political groups looking to claw their way into power. One day, this district will put someone in that seat over there who only wants to help educate children in the healthiest of ways, unbound by the undercurrent of money and power. One day, other suckers like myself, with nothing to lose and no strings attached to anything but helping kids, more of us will be elected into these seats. People who are free to speak the truth and who will make decisions that are hopefully purely good for humanity with no politics to navigate. And then, fine business folks of Baton Rouge and beyond, you will have to turn your attentions away from our clouded yet readily available large budget, and perhaps, if education still interests you, learn to focus on the long game that is human development, that of pure interest in the betterment of humanity that uplifts everyone, not from cradle to career, but from cradle to successful, well-adjusted, capable, happy human and beyond. It's my great hope that one day we stop using the disadvantaged to our advantage and start actually literally using our advantages to raise up every student every day. It takes a village. In closing, and I've said this before, the success of the individual depends on the success of the whole, and vice versa. We are all one. And until we put our egos aside and truly learn that, nothing will change. So finally, I'll just share the fine words of Dr. Seuss. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Thank you.
Thank you, School Board Member Katie Kennison. I'm next inside of the queue. Trying to see where I start. Let's start here. You talk about the future of Baton Rouge kids and giving them real opportunities around our community. That's honestly what a lot of what you are seeing inside of the budget. Now, is it very well spelled out? No, but we have time to fix that part. I won't say that anybody on this board does not take the serious perspective or approach every single time they step inside of this boardroom to put their best foot forward on behalf of our kids. There's no way I'll say something like that. What I will say is this. When you see an additional $200 for school aids, it's because teachers don't have the money to pay for classroom supplies. And $200 over the course of 1 year is simply not enough. So we said, let's double that. When you talk about workforce development, there are no job opportunities right now as it stands inside of the city of Baton Rouge because businesses are not coming here. The reason why they are not is because they're paying very close attention to what is happening inside of our school district. That is how the business of moving pipelines to careers happens. So what did we say inside of this particular option? It was, one, teachers should get paid to go to PDs. That money was added. Students should have dollars that align to internships. That is on behalf of the school district because no companies are offering things like that. When you talk about tutoring services, the schools that need it the most are the ones that are lowest performing because we've never had anything like that before. And to ask teachers to go over and above and beyond again without having the dollars and necessary resources to get that done, I don't think that's fair. And I too feel the sentiments of our Vice President, Ms. Carla Powell-Lewis. When I hear companies like Brick, who've been doing this work, who have proven results, they should have the support of our school district because at the end of the day, it adds to good results. Is this a perfect budget? No, it's not. But I can tell you this, you're not going to find a perfect budget. You won't find a perfect budget anywhere. But we're going to continue to work. We're going to continue to strive to get to a place where we feel comfortable. In fact, tonight, after we leave out of this boardroom, School Board Member Nathan Russ has a town hall, and we're going to take all of those concerns that we hear at that town hall, and we're also going to make the proper and just recommendations that are needed. I hear your sentiments, School Board Member Patrick Martin. I also hear your sentiments, School Board Member Michael Goday. We should not put the cart before the horse, and we have to build out a plan that is not only equitable, but one that is sustainable. So there are possible changes that we can make instead of saying that we're going to plan out 2 years, because at the end of the day, we have to make sure we get in front of our budget. But even talking about the budget, every month moving forward, I ask that our board comes up with an item that makes sure that we are properly and progressively paying attention to our board budget on a month-by-month basis. So that way, moving forward, we won't find ourselves in this position again. But I do want us to walk away knowing one thing. We're putting our teachers first. We are putting the money where it should go. We're making sure that we're putting it inside of your salaries, and that we're also giving you all a stipend to ensure that we get to the 8%. So I'll just stop there. Seeing no other comments, we will now call for a motion. I'm sorry.
Public comment.
We don't.
No, we took a motion.
So we did presentation first, and then allowed the board to comment based on those presentations. And then I said we're going to make a motion that we'll go back around again to make sure we're in correct order tonight. So it's a parliamentary procedure. Okay.
Is the motion in order right now? Is that
1 second. I don't know the item. Which one? No, I need to read the item into the record.
what? I mean, I can do. I'll just make it easy.
All right, now we will take in consideration item B1, consideration of a request to select a general fund and special revenue fund budget and authorize staff to advertise and provide public notice for the budget prior to final approval as required by law. Can I get a motion? Moved by School Board Member Mark Ballou.
I'm moving for option 4B.
Okay, 4B's on the floor. Can I get a second? Seconded by School Board Member Ms. Shoshone Stewart.
Mr. Landis, I'm going to jump in for a second. Had this discussion just before the meeting. So the general fund budget, I believe that the budget that the board is, that Mr. Blue is adopting is version 4B. The special fund budget, I believe, is version 4A. So the motion needs to clarify that specifically. And if Mr. Crochet needs to speak to that, he can.
That's what I meant.
Okay. So we don't need to clarify? I need to read that into the record again?
You don't need to read into the record again. I just want to make sure Mr. Blue's motion is electing those versions, because there's a special fund associated with 4A, a general fund associated with 4B. Just want to make sure that the board knows what it's voting on. Make sure that we're clear.
So we're voting on general fund budget 4B and special revenue fund budget 4A. Okay. We have a motion by School Board Member Mark Ballou, seconded by School Board Member Ms. Shoshone Stewart. Okay, this time now we come back to our board. I see Coach Lewis inside the clue. Okay, thank you, Coach. School Board Member Patrick Martin, you're in the queue.
Thank you. A question either for you, President Lannis, or Mr. Shamlin. Just for clarity, is the expectation that under the motion, that there will be additional work based in part on the town hall meeting that's going to happen afterwards, as you suggested, President Lannis, before some version of the budget gets published on July 17th, or is voting for this specific motion as worded, locking us in to say what's published on the 17th has to be exactly what the current state of 4B and 4A is?
That is correct, what you just said.
Okay.
What's currently published in 4B, general fund, and Yes, sir. That's what, Ms. Lopez is on a plane going somewhere right now, so the budget is what it is. So, so July 17th is when it will be advertised. That's the recommendation right now, some version of it. And then it'll be available for public inspection and potentially approved and adopted on the 31st with a public hearing.
But my specific question, though, is that, right now there is a, several hundred-page long, copy document, which is General Fund 4B and Special Fund 4A, correct?
Correct.
And if we vote in favor of this motion as worded, does that mean that the several hundred-page document that is formally noticed on July 17th is going to be 100% identical to the version of 4B and 4A as they currently stand? Or does this motion as worded give the president the flexibility, working with the superintendent and staff, to make tweaks based on continued public input from the town hall meeting and other sources prior to the publication on July 17th?
Point of information. My understanding, and you correct me if I'm wrong, General Counsel, is that until this budget is advertised, we can make any necessary changes that we need.
Well, I would recommend Mr. Martin, to address Mr. Martin's concern that the motion specifically give the president the authority or staff to modify the budget if needed prior to publication. I think that's required. I think I would recommend that be included in the motion to make sure the board knows what it's voting on and what it's actually authorizing.
Could I suggest that there be a friendly amendment to the motion to authorize the president to make the final decision based on continued public input, including at Mr. Russ Town Hall and elsewhere, as to what's going to go in the publication notice? Would that be a friendly amendment?
So that's putting an awful lot of trust in President Lannis.
I have the trust in President Lannis.
But yes, I'm willing to accept that.
Okay.
There is an additional concern, board members. I'm just voicing this for members of the staff. Superintendent, the CFO is not here. So
Yes.
if the document is editable or not, I can't make that decision or call, but that's something that staff may need to speak to.
I have faith that Ms. Lopez can be reached to have somebody edit the file.
Ms. Smith, is that a possibility?
So, what I was trying to cue the general counsel to say is that we must publish by the 17th for the deadline of the 31st. Right now, unfortunately, there are some limitations with the ability to enter into the budget changes in the absence of Ms. Lopez. Mr. Crochet will have to speak to his ability to do so, but right now, the person who has that sole ability is Ms. Lopez, and she will not be available as of today. My question for the attorney is, if we get edits from the board ahead of Monday and we have those documented, would that be sufficient for our advertisement on the 17th?
As long as the changes can be made to the budget document as needed to publish it, correct? But I still believe the motion needs to specify that we be able to do that.
Mr. Shamel, let's assume that the actual computer file that constitutes the budget is not editable in the absence of Ms. Lopez. We could still perhaps, in the notice, include the budget and then a 2 or 3 or however many pages it takes, say, with the following changes, which will ultimately be incorporated in the budget document. So we can change it. We just, it's like a legislative amendment, right? Which just says change line 2 to read this and so forth.
Yeah, my assumption going on what you're saying is that we could attach a document or page that specifies those amendments or changes to the budget.
Strike this language on page 3 and so forth.
Yes.
So I think, to Mr. Goday's question, I think we do have 4 days. It's not a lot, but I think that there are some valuable changes that can be made in that time period, and I have faith in the ability of our president working with several of us individually to based on the public feedback we get tonight and at this meeting and at the town hall to make those changes. So I think the friendly amendment's been accepted.
Yes, sir. And I absolutely commit to meeting and talking to any school board members that have any modifications or any changes that we need to make and ensuring that we can get those things done before we publicize on the 17th.
And understanding that ultimately each of us on the 31st, is that when we're having the special meeting? We'll be making up our own independent judgment on the result of that and what the final version noticed is.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Okay. That's all the question I had. Thank you very much for everybody's cooperation.
No problem. Next in the, okay. Coach Lewis, you're back in?
Yeah.
Okay, you got it.
And, you know, this may be just kind of beating a dead horse to death, but was this document made to publish to the public? The comparison chart? Everybody, it's on board docs. Okay. Again, maybe too late, but I would love to have seen it version 2 and version 4, side by side. I really would. That may be too late, you know. Let's hope not. But here's the thing, and we've talked about academics, we've talked about workforce development, we've talked about a lot of things that are embedded in this budget. The most important thing that's in this budget is how is it going to allow us to move students forward, moves their families forward. You know, how is this going to allow us to become a progressive 21st century school district? And I hate to use that word 21st century because we're almost 24 years in. And we're sitting here talking about things, you know, like the 21st century started yesterday. There are some great things going on in this district. I think some of the focused choice, I think some of the pathways, all those things are really good things that we need for our kids. Because, and I'll go on record maybe for the 100th time saying it, for so long in this district, it did not exist. And nobody really cared, I believe. Now, I may be wrong. I've been wrong before. But I think we're on the right track. The thing about version 2 is that for one solid year, it gave us the opportunity to operate in a very, quoting Vice President Powell, in a safe space. We could be conservative. We could look at where we were going. We're talking about consolidating schools and doing things like that. Well, I might want to sell a building for $5 million, but it's only worth $3 million. You know, nobody's going to give me $5 million for a building that's only worth $3 million. So, you know, and there's ways that I'm sure monies will come in. We don't know that. Nobody knew the pandemic was going to show up neither. Nobody knew the 2016 flood was going to show up neither. And I'm sure there were plans that got blown to smithereens behind those two events. We've got an opportunity to operate for a year as a conservative body that's not going to do anything to put us in jeopardy. And I know we talked earlier about, well, some of the things in this version, they aren't in stone. We don't have to do that. Well, maybe if it had been put up against version 2, we could have said the same thing about version 2. Maybe if we're conservative enough and do the right things, maybe we can have a raise next year or an additional stipends next year. Again, I go back to the first word I learned was fiduciary when I got on this board, and I see us, we need to be in a space where that is our North Star. What can we do to make sure this district is financially solvable, make sure that our teachers are paid? There's money in here for professional development. Well, let's spend $1 million on professional development for our teachers. Let's make sure our teachers and our school leaders can create a culturally sensitive environment. Make sure, let's do professional development to make sure that parents feel welcome when they come to school. I mean, let's spend this $5.7 million, and a lot of these things are good in here. I think what Brick does is fantastic. Maybe if we could duplicate some of the things Brick does, we may have higher graduation rates. I don't know. But I do know that we have got to find a way to move the district forward. We got to find a way to move the district forward. And you talk about workforce development all you want. A lot of people, that's all they want is workforce development. But ACT in college is the gateway to our children having successful lives. Ain't nothing wrong with a 2-year degree, and there's nothing wrong with a industrial-based certificate. But there's something really good about a 4-year college degree. So as much as we're going to focus on workforce development and those types of things, let's make sure we focus on college and getting our kids educated. It's not all about workforce. Now, God knows we need it in EBR. But we also need for our kids not to lose sight of what a college degree can mean to their lives. It could make generational changes in some of the kids' lives that teachers see every day. And with that being said, I'm going to support version 2. There's no way I'm going to sit up here and vote against myself. Especially after, anyway, I'm not going to sit up here and vote against myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach. Next in the queue, we have School Board Member Katie Kennison.
Thank you. Again, echoing sentiments of Coach Lewis, I agree with all the things he's saying. This list of like 14 things that got shoved into the new version yesterday is a lovely example of like how things are working around here. And I don't think they're all bad. Some of them are really good, but some of them were specifically asked by multiple board members to end contracts with when we were talking about these things in May. Arbinger being one of them. They're a consulting firm. We paid, I think, $500,000 last year, if that's right. We were going to cut them a bunch, along with a lot of other cuts to after having meetings about this. This was cutting some of these things were part of the solution, so we could all have our opinions be respected about what we're doing. And suddenly, a multitude of them are just back a day before we're supposed to vote on it. It's not okay. So I can't support version 4B at all. Like, also with what Coach Lewis was saying, like the teachers are the district. I maintain that. You guys need big raises. I don't disagree that you guys need a bunch of money. You do, but we do need this year to clean up the budget, to figure out where we're going to get it. And then I would love to just not give promises of more money like 4 years, 3 years, 2 years down the road, but be able to say next year, everyone's getting a raise and here it is. Congratulations. No empty promises. So this version 4B doesn't make sense to me, but so I support version 2. It makes it's fiscally responsible. It's doing what we can with what we have and giving us time to do right by all of you and to give you what you actually deserve and not just say we're going to do it. So I don't know how it works. Can I make a substitute motion to move the second version? Or are we going to vote on 4? And then
You can make a substitute motion to adopt another budget version. So,
all right, I'd like to make a substitute motion to adopt version 2.
okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Lancer, we need to go to board comment.
Yes, sir.
public comment on that motion.
So we come back to board comment. We are now commenting on substitute motion to adopt. Coach Lewis. We are now commenting, the board is now commenting on on the motion on the floor to adopt version 2, or option 2, for general fund budget.
I believe that would be option 2 for both the general fund budget and the special fund.
Yes, sir. I was just clarifying. So this is an item on the floor to adopt option 2 for general fund budget and special revenue budget. And that was moved by School Board Member Katie Kennison and seconded by School Board Member Coach Lewis. All right. We now come back to the board. School Board Member and Vice President, Ms. Carla Powell Lewis, is inside of the queue. However, she said that she wants to waive. Okay. Next in the queue, we have School Board Member Patrick Martin.
Thank you, President Lannis. I think, one of the I've already expressed my concern over the 3-year commitment. I disagree with the 3-year commitment language in version 4, but in terms of the financial impact of version 4, I know some people are concerned that the larger amount of stipend, salary supplement, what have you, contained in version 4 puts us in precarious financial position. However, we just finished out the last fiscal year with a $21 million surplus, right? We had similar surpluses in years before that, right? That to me indicates that we have a multi-year trend of underestimating our revenue or overestimating our expenses or some combination thereof. So by my rough math based on previous conversations that, there's maybe, the 4% stipend is something like $16 million, give or take, somewhere in that ballpark. And so even if our official kind of funding source is the Prop 3, surplus revenue that we have sitting in somebody else's bank account right now, I think that the consistent trend of annual operating surpluses gives me a comfort level that this is not an irresponsible financial decision to give this much more to the teachers. I would hate to be in a position where we came back a year from now and had $21 million left over, just like we just had, and say, man, if only we had given that to the teachers, that maybe that would have helped stem the loss of teachers. So that's why at core I support the higher stipend for teachers contained in item 4. I don't think it's fiscally irresponsible to do that, and that's what gives me the comfort level. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, School Board Member Patrick Martin. Next, seeing no other names inside of the queue at this time, we will go to our public. And first up, we have Mr. Jamie Robertson. Mr. Robinson, for the record, I'm sorry, not to run time. I'm just clarifying. We're speaking on item.
The substitute motion.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
aware. Thank
Okay.
you. First off, let me start by saying, Ms. Kennerson, you gave a lot of thank yous today, but for me, and I think many of us, thank you for those comments. It may not have gone well with other people, but it resonated with a lot of us, and it made a lot of us feel much better. Secondly, I would like to say that, School Board Member Lannis, you stated that this is us putting teachers first. And I just want to say, if this is putting teachers first, I hate to see you all neglecting teachers. I recognize that you probably could not have been the best managers of the budget as you could have been if you were given all of the information that you have asked for time and time again. But what I can say is you could have been a better manager of the personnel in which you have autonomy over, and that's that man right there. How is it possible that you can come here every meeting and ask for information and not receive that information, and he gets off the hook for that scot-free? In addition to that, you still put his contract on the agenda. It doesn't make sense. And if you're wondering, that's a slap in the face to all of the people who received a letter saying that they may not have a job next year. It's a slap in the face to the teachers that you promised to give a raise to. one of the conditions of the budget is to give a increase to HES. I challenge you guys to ask yourselves, to ask the superintendent or whomever he sends up here to answer the question on his behalf. That $1 million, will that go to giving a raise to the custodians? And I ask that question because when we bought HES here, our custodians were making a fixed rate. They were promised that the rate would not decrease. That was a lie because it did decrease. Will that $1 million increase go to giving those professionals a raise? And finally, I urge you all to please accept this substitute motion. Why? Because Proposition 4 will cut too many positions. Do you know what teachers have been asking for long before a pay raise? It was adequate staffing. Imagine teachers going to a place where they had completely staffing on the administrative staff, complete staffing in their support teams who push into their classrooms. If you make the egregious decision to cut so many positions, so many people, when you already do not have adequate staffing in any school in this parish, shame on you. And if you're wondering if you're doing a good job, I'll let you guess what I would say.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Next, we have Ms. Angela Reams-Brown.
Good afternoon, Board President, members of the board. You know, I cringe each time we have board meetings because for me, we don't represent a district that's working toward the same goal, and that would be the boys and girls that we are responsible for to assist with educating and getting them ready for adulthood to become productive citizens. I believe that option 4, whether it's B or A, should be the one that we select. First of all, I'm not interested in who made promises. Every last one of you all should have promised something to the teachers and support workers of this district, because without them, there is no school district. And where I see we are having some staffing challenges, and we're talking about people may lose their positions, and you give the community the wrong impression when you say they're fired or they're terminated. That's not the case. What's important for me is that when that child walks into that classroom, there is a certified teacher there to teach them and support staff there to assist the educators. That's where the learning starts. I don't know of any store or any body who accepts for payment, I'm gonna pay you next year, or I'll have more money next year. Teachers, just like everyone else, have bills to pay. They have to experience the increase in the cost of living. They can't wait till next year. They deserve, they're entitled to, they've showed effort. This district has grown academically. And why did it grow? Because your teachers and your support staff. Not because of any school board members. Let's make that very clear. It's because of the people who are at the school. Now let me speak to Hess and the $1 million. I'm definitely not in favor of it. There's no way that I feel that we should give that company $1 million. They provided us with a contract, we accepted their contract, and they said we could deliver the services. We don't need to give them another $1 million. If they can't do it with the money that we're already paying them, then we need to negotiate with some other companies. The other thing I want to also say is, you know, somebody says we don't know. What I do know is the East Baton Rouge Parish School System would not be where it is today without the teachers and support workers that come to work every day and make this district the district it is. This district has grown, and for people who look like me, our boys and girls have services that they never had under any other superintendents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reams-Brown. And if I could, and we'll go back to public comment, and tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm out of order by giving a point of information, General Counsel. And I'm only doing this because I heard Hess come up several times. I just want to clarify. While there is a item that says $1 million, that is not for Hess. That is for the subcontractors who clean the schools and the buildings at night. As it currently stands, we had talks with district, and right now there's not enough adequate staffing, and they can't pay a livable wage. So that money goes to the people who live in this community, that give back to this community, and that serve this community as a subcontractor. Just wanted to clarify that, right? Going right back into it. Next we have Dr. James Finney.
Thank you. I have a strong preference for 2 over 4, A, B, C, Q, whatever the version of the day is. But whatever version you choose to advertise the existence of and to make available for public inspection, from that point on, you need to be very clear on what changes and what doesn't change. If I've counted right, there are either 9 or 10 versions of the budget that you've been presented. And finally, on July 13th, maybe we have what the superintendent and his administration really want. That's absolutely unacceptable. You're paying people really well to put up with that level of incompetence. It's bad enough that the administration can't get their act together. That's disappointing, but what's absolutely astounding and aggravating is that you elected officials tolerate it. And you're even encouraging it by giving him the idea that the visitor from Maryland can have another 3 years on our payroll in a community he has no intent to make a home in. It's terribly disappointing. I'm a firm believer in the public good. Public education taught me well, taught my kids well. My kids have 5 Louisiana Tech degrees among the 3 of them, based on the strength of their public education. Do not screw this up because you're trying to do what you think the chamber and some higher education executives tell you should be doing to support workplace preparation, whatever that is. Your job is serving the students in the community. Your job is making safe schools available so the kids can become adults. If they want to go get a job, great. They should have the tools to be employed. If they want to go to college, that's great. You should give them the tools to become well educated. If they just want to go stand out in the woods and meditate, you should make sure that they've got the tools they need to be able to do that and sustain themselves as content adults. You should absolutely not pay somebody $250,000 a year and expect absolute, egregious, pathetic incompetence. There is no way you should get the final half-hearted attempt. Sorry, I almost pulled a Patrick Martin. You should not accept that in the middle of July. If he wanted to throw a floater out in early March and then revise it through early April and then say, okay, from this point on, if you want changes, make amendments, that would be acceptable. So pick something, but I don't think there is a ghost of a chance that you can legally adopt a budget in July, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. James Finney. School Board Member Patrick Martin, please add him to your list when you talk to your teacher. Next we have Ms. Fairleigh Jackson.
Thank you for putting up with us. I think we all get just as confused as many of you do in our comments. This is bringing me back to what feels like a little bit of PTSD from our redistricting experience, where we had 14 maps. You know, we're almost at a point of like 10 budgets. And what we ended up with was a map that is completely unfair to our community. We ended up with a map that doesn't fully represent our community, a map that is over a decade old. And that's why you are all sitting here. And while I'm glad you're here, it is not representing this district. So I just want us to think about when we get to this point of confusion and multiple budgets and all of this, you're gonna end up with something that is not fair. Your president had suggested that we don't make this decision until July 24th, if I remember correctly. I really urge you all. I mean, we had a budget thrown up yesterday, and it almost feels like thrown up. I mean, I'm sorry to say that, but this is where we are. And where you all are as decision makers, and where we are as the public, and it is not fair. And we have teachers and union leaders who were out of town last week at the most important event of their year, and they couldn't be here last week when y'all scheduled this meeting. And you moved that meeting to 5 last week out of respect for those people, out of respect for people that work until 5, for district workers that work until 5. And no one here had opposition to going into recess until 5. But here you are because one board member had a meeting that is almost superfluous at this point, if you really are thinking about choosing a budget tonight, which is what has been said. It would be really nice for you all to work as a team, take one for the team. Don't limit this meeting. There's a lot of important things. Why you put the other 3 items on this special meeting, I don't understand. We don't understand what you're doing right now. Those of us that have been watching the board for years, we're kind of flabbergasted. And some of you respond, and I appreciate it so much. Some of you do not. You have important things that are floating around in addition to this. But we're confused. I understand y'all are confused. Give yourself some time. You couldn't even figure out the motion a minute ago, right? Or it was like, wait, is it the general fund budget this? Is it the special fund budget this? That's a little wild for a public body for a budget so big. I think you need to step back and take a little time. And I'm not saying this is all of your faults. It is what it is, though, as my dad says. I don't like that saying, and I can't believe I repeated it, but he'll be proud. So
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Next, we have Mr. Stephen Coleman.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Kuhlmans. I'm the Executive Director for the Baton Rouge Health District. The Baton Rouge Health District is a coalition of patient-focused, innovative healthcare organizations committed to a division of a world-class, high-performing health destination at the heart of a vibrant and healthy community in Baton Rouge. The founding members of our coalition include the Baton Rouge Area Foundation, Baton Rouge General Medical Center, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana, Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center, Our Lady of the Lake Regional Medical Center, Ochsner Health, Pennington Biomedical Research Center, and Women's Hospital. Along with providing life-saving medical services to the community, the Baton Rouge healthcare industry, with over 50,000 supported jobs, is one of the most significant regional economic drivers, accounting for a large industry sector share of 15% of total employment within our region. Health industries are the largest salary provider in the Baton Rouge capital region, with a collective annual payroll of $1.8 billion and a consistent annual employment growth rate of 2%. Health workforce needs across our region are now more important than ever, with job vacancy rates reaching unprecedented heights of 25% in certain clinical and ancillary health occupations across our major employers and region. We applaud and support the workforce development initiatives that create opportunities for students and help students strategically envision their futures through internships, as reflected in version 4 and 4B of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Storm Matthews.
I just want to say, you said something, President Lannis, and so I'm going to say this for my teachers. You were talking about PD. They would absolutely love it if we got paid for safe schools. It's the mandated ridiculousness of training that the state makes us do. So just FYI, it takes us 55 million years. All employees have to do it. Okay. So if no staffing changes were made with either of these budgets, I would like to know why another round of those infamous letters went out on July 10th. And, in one of those meetings, the word reduction in force was actually used because we're not in a RIF. Also, you have 15 APs currently working that don't know their placement. they're being paid on last year's budget. I had to reassure 2 of them today, you will be paid. You're at work. You're going to be paid. You're going to be paid on last year's budget. We've reverted to last year's budget because we're in the new fiscal year. But they're at work not knowing what is going to happen. Now, if there is no staffing changes in the budgets, why do they not know where they're going to be? If there's no staffing changes in either of these budgets, why did a new round? So now we have more than 160. I think maybe it was Katie that said 160 people. No, it's more than 160 because we've had a new round of those letters that went out on the 10th. I'm just waiting for my public records request to come back. And I can get that information to you all. Also, at the last board meeting, school consolidation was discussed. That's really not going to save us money, as board member Kennison alluded to. When we consolidate those schools, when we try to sell the buildings, they have to be sold for fair market price. But if we have a private buyer that's going to buy from us and a charter school that's going to buy from us, we have to, by policy, sell to the charter. Let's say the private buyer wants to buy for $15 million and the charter school wants to buy for $10 million. We have to sell it for the $10 million. We don't get to make the profit. Then we're selling to the competitor. We're not necessarily going to make, and I understand this is a vastly pro-charter board, but still, it's still the competitor. We're not going to necessarily make money. And consolidating the littles, consolidating elementary schools, there's a reason why the littles are in smaller groups to begin with. God bless anybody who works in elementary. But please, please do the budget too, because that keeps us in a safer place. But I do like some of the things that are in the 4, but I like it with the 2. So maybe some mixture that Mr. Martin was talking about. Okay, just thought.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Next, we have Dr. Leach.
Good evening. I'm going to start with addressing Board Member Cliff Lewis. You pushed for college education. As a fact, and it's been researched, in the next 20 to 30 years, they expect 70% of colleges in this country to be closed, to be shut down. So we need to start looking at other avenues of preparing people for careers. Another thing is that I heard a lot of mean, nasty, egregious attacks on the superintendent. And that's personal. It has nothing to do, and it shouldn't happen, and it shouldn't be allowed, and it shouldn't be allowed. I have said every time I got up here, I support budget 4A, 4B. Things will change. Again, I ask you guys to not make this personal, to not make it a part of the agendas you ran on to do what it was you promised your constituents that you would do, but to do what is reasonable and fair. And the district can afford to provide teachers supplemental salaries utilizing budgets 4A and 4B. I'm trying to think. As an aside, someone came up and commented on, again, the superintendent. I guess it had to do with his interview in another state. I don't know how many of you have worked with superintendents or know superintendents, but it happens throughout the nation. Superintendents do not stay in their jobs for 10, 15, 20 years. It doesn't happen. No one does. The expectancy of anybody in the world, as in this century, as it is today, is to have about 15 jobs over the course of your life. So that's a moot point. And please stop going back to when you got the budget. We know it. You got it in May. Deal with it. It's July. Handle it. Read it. Get over it. Make a decision. And let's move on. So people know where they are in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Dr. Leach. Next, we have Ms. Tanja McMillan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tanya McMillan, parent of a child here in EBR schools. I was watching the meeting live, and when Katie was speaking, I was saying, "Go, Katie, go." And the reason why is because as elected representatives, you are elected to represent and speak for the people, not think for the people. So, and oftentimes, I don't hear things that I have communicated being communicated on this board panel. One of the things that I communicated this weekend to Superintendent Cito Narcisse was that I was, as a parent, in tears last week when I heard that child speak that has the Exxon internship. 5 years ago, my friend Dexter Tolbert did a back-to-school haircut drive at Glen Oaks High School. That was the first time that I ever laid eyes on President Lanus. In order for the kids to get the free haircuts, they had to be able to tell us what they wanted to be when they grew up. We had 76 children there, all black boys. All of them had dreams and aspirations, from being race car drivers to computer engineers to doctors to police officers, firefighters, teachers. None of them said they wanted to be incarcerated, but that's what statistics show. So, and I often think about the young man who was going into his senior year that year, who you could look at and tell he hadn't had a haircut all summer. He wasn't dressed in the nicest clothes or the nicest shoes, but he was one of the most polite young men I'd ever come in contact with. He stayed through the whole program and helped us carry our things out to our car. I often think about that child. I often wonder what happened to him and how his life would be different had Cito Narcisse been the superintendent at that time. I'm not here to rally for Cito Narcisse, I'm here to rally for the students. And our kids need some of those programs that he has put into place. So I don't care what budget y'all choose, as long as it's the right budget for the children. And it doesn't cut funding in that particular program, which is the Pathways program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McMillan. Next, we have Ms. Valencia Johnson.
Good evening. Valencia Johnson, the president of the East Baton Rouge Parish Association of Educators. I've heard a lot of debate about the two options that are presented, and with the additions that have been added to option 4, I think that we need to, or you guys need to, go back and look at these changes and actually see how these changes are going to affect, and you need more time. And I am not in favor, and my members are not in favor of a budget that is going to have the potential to cut more educators. Everyone needs their job. Everyone has been working hard, and yes, we do need a raise. We need the highest raise that we can get. We need more than the 8%. But at what cost are we going to do that 8% or the option 4 or the option 2? Option 2 gives you wiggle room. If at a certain point, if you do option 2, you can come back, oh, we have this excess money, then we can give additional stipend. I think that it would be irresponsible for us to do 4 without making sure that our employees are held inside the classroom as far and outside of the classroom. If we're going to continue to cut them or drop their position, drop their pay, the raise is just putting them back essentially where they were. And let's keep in mind that option 4 is really not a raise, it's a stipend as well. So if we're selling it to them as it's a raise, it's a stipend. It's a stipend for year 1, 2, and then maybe a consideration only if it's feasible. well, we know it's not going to be feasible. So what are we really discussing? And then we added additional money to option 4 that we are going to spend. It's not responsible. We have to be responsible. And I understand that we need it. I understand it more than anybody else because I'm a teacher as well. Been doing it for 13 years in this district. I've never worked outside of this district. I love this district. So do my members. That's why we come to work every day. But the salary is not the only problem for the district. It's how you treat your teachers. We got people who still don't know if they're going to have a job. That's irresponsible. They have to feed their families as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Next, we have Dr. Nikki Dangerfield. Ms. Dangerfield, you going to wave? Are you coming? Oh, okay.
Good afternoon. I had put on my card what I wanted to say, but I didn't want to actually come up here. But my name is Nikki Dangerfield, and I am in support of option 4B. You all have committed to making sure that you're putting children first and making sure that they have good outcomes. And option 4 will pay the teachers that are with them each and every day, the support workers that are with them each and every day, give them the programs that are needed to push them forward. I too was impacted last week by the young man. I have 3 boys and a daughter that all 3 went through this school district. My daughter graduated from Astruma High School as valedictorian. She went on to LSU, got her master's in HR. She now works for a global company, and she is a product of EBR. I have 3 boys, like I said, and if Dr. Narcisse was here during the time my boys went through this system, I can say that they probably would have had a better outcome. Don't get me wrong. I thank God I've never been to the jailhouse, and I have not been to the graveyard, but having these different opportunities, I am a mother of many children, but I've only birthed 4. And seeing students, young men, I have to stand up and be that voice for them and try to lead them in the right way. But if they would have had programs and opportunities that we have now in this district, they would also have a different choice. So I say that option 4 is best for the teachers that's in the classrooms, because if you have a teacher that's not focused on their income, they can focus on our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dangerfield. Next, we have Coach Eric Brown.
How y'all doing? First, I want to say I'm in support of 4B, without a doubt. And also, I want to say we got to stop playing politics. I would love to work with Katie Kennison. I really would. But she is a true politician. I mean, when I first walked in, you just spewed out a lot of stuff that didn't have nothing to do with the budget, and you talk about the 160-some people, like for their jobs. What about the 40,000 kids? I haven't seen you at Astruma High School. I haven't seen you at Capital Middle, Capital Elementary, and I go on and on and on. But you of this community. You speaking for us. So come speak to me, because I'm part of this community. Come speak to me. My name is Eric Brown. Come speak for me. Because right now it just seems like you're just speaking for teachers. Teachers. And over half my friends teachers. But they don't support you. Okay? And I'm not pointing a finger at you, but I want you to come speak to the people in the community. Like you say, community people. Well, I am a community person. Believe me. All my life. I'll do anything to help you. But I want you to help our kids too. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach Brown. Seeing no other cards at this time, we will now come back to our board. Seeing no names inside of the queue, I'm sorry. We have School Board Member Mark Ballou.
Thank you, President Lannis. I think budgets are about making priorities, and to me, I think the option 4B sends a message that we as a district prioritize attracting and retaining high-quality teachers. I think the other option 2, does to a certain extent. I just think option 4B is a more meaningful message and more meaningful commitment that we as a board prioritize attracting and retaining high-quality teachers, and we're willing to do the work to make sure that we make the structural changes we need in order to make those supplements permanent. So I'll be voting against the substitute amendment.
Thank you, School Board Member Mark Ballou. Seeing no other names inside of the queue at this time, Madam Secretary, I'm sorry, let me read the item because I know Coach is about to get me. The item, I'm sorry, go ahead. The item that we are about to vote on is a substitute motion that the board adopts option 2 as our general fund budget and option 2 as our special revenue fund budget.
Yes, sir, with one correction, is select, not adopt.
Select.
It's just a select to further publicize and go through the legal notice process.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
So we will be selecting. Okay, Madam Secretary?
Please vote. The motion fails.
Okay, we now go back to the original motion that was presented by School Board Member Mark Ballou, seconded by School Board Member Mr. Shoney Stewart, which was to select option 4A as our general fund budget. I'm sorry, 4B as our general fund budget, and option 4A as our special revenue budget.
And also, I believe, to authorize the board president with support from the superintendent and CFO to amend or edit that budget as needed prior to publication.
Yes, sir. Okay. We now go back to the board for comment. I'm going to enter the queue. I'll be really quick. I just want to say to our community, thank you all for voicing your concerns tonight. Whether you agree with the budget process that we go with or whichever proposal that we choose tonight, I just want us to walk away and be very clear, because I see all the cameras and I see the media, and I want the media to know that these are healthy conversations. Because sometimes healthy conversation does not mean that everybody always agrees, but it means that you walk away with a compromise, or you walk away with an understanding that you may not have advocated for something, but now you see something new, or you see new insights inside of the situation. So I want to just say first, I want to commend our board for their concerns and their ability to work across the board to ensure that we can get this done in a meaningful and impactful way that represents our community across this entire parish. So I just want to be clear about that. And I am now out of the queue, seeing no other names inside of the queue at this time. I will open up for public comment. Ms. Storm Matthews.
4B speaks to a new millage. I really like the idea of a new millage. Don't know if it'll pass. It's in the comparison chart. Oh, okay, you were giving me that look. Okay. Anyways, I don't know if it'll pass, but I think that regardless of which one y'all end up voting on, I think that that is something that we should work on and try to get done, in addition to making the budgetary cuts to support a long-term fiscally sound raise so that we can afford it. I don't think that either of these budgets, any budget, is ready. I am not satisfied with the alternative school situation. We can talk about that later. I am not satisfied with staffing placements. There are so many unanswered questions right now that are outside of any type of stipend or raise. That is not the budget. The budget is so much more. And I mean, we're focused, everybody is focused on this. Oh, but what do we get for this? What do we get for that? There's so much more that involves every aspect of these children's lives over this next year. And there are so many more unanswered questions, and this is so rushed right now. And the alternative schools is huge for me right now. And I just, we're not ready. And I'm hoping, Dr. Narcisse, that we can have a sit down and talk about that, hopefully this week. But we're not ready, and we need to have that fixed before this budget is settled.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Next we have Mr. Jamie Robertson.
My grandmother always told me you can't rob Peter to pay Paul. And in your case, you can't rob Peter to pay Paul because you owe Thelma and Louise too. I've never seen people mismanage and misappropriate funding as you're doing right now. Where's the compassion and the empathy for the people who's going to be out of a job if this passes? Where's your compassion for school bus drivers and cafeteria workers who won't get the same stipend as others? What do you think that's going to tell them? Because I can tell you what they want. They want to be valued. And you cannot tell me that you value me when you treat someone else better than you treat me. That's a problem. You guys have to start caring about the message that you are delivering to people. Just as now, you guys ask us to give you respect and honor as we come before you. But Mr. Gode can't even look up at us as we talk. He has his head in his phone. Hopefully he's replying to one of the numerous emails that a constituent or someone like me have sent him that he hasn't replied to. That's a problem. Even now, you don't care about what you're saying. This is a bad deal. You cannot afford to do this. You can vote no, and you still have time to get it right. Don't act as if this doesn't remind you of last year. We told you last year you didn't have the money to do what you did last year. Now we're telling you this year you can't afford to do it. But maybe next year, if you do this, you'll say, no one knew. This was totally unforeseeable, but everyone else saw it. Many of you wear glasses. Use them.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Next, we have Ms. Tanja McMillan.
Tanya McMillan, parent of a child here in EBR schools. And I just want to ask that you guys do take a little bit more time to comb through these budgets. Just me as a parent looking through them. And again, I have no political bone in this race. I'm a registered independent, to be honest with you, because nobody's going to tell me how to think. But just looking through the budget, there's so many inequities. One in particular, our regular schools have over 1,500 employees. Their travel expense budget, $4,000. Our magnet schools have about 150 employees. Their travel expense budget, $230,000. That's a huge inequity. If you're investing more in certain teachers in certain schools, you're going to have better outcomes with those teachers in those schools. How do you justify 1,500 employees and $4,000? versus 150 employees and $230,000. I don't know if y'all saw it, but I saw it. I was up till 1 o'clock in the morning combing through the budget. So I ask that you guys take a little more time to look at it a little more carefully and make sure that our money is being used equitably. And my child attends a magnet school. I'm not here to bash them or anybody else, but I'm here to speak for all the children, just as you guys were elected to represent all the children, not one group. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McMillan. Next, we have Ms. Fairleigh Jackson.
Did someone leave their phone up here? Tanya, is that you? I actually am not going to make any comments. I don't really honestly see the point. So thank you. I'll see you on the next item.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jackson. Seeing no other cue cards at this time, we will come back to the board. School Board Member Patrick Martin, you're in the queue.
Thank you, President Lannis. Like you, I appreciate the healthy exchange of views that we've had tonight. I think it's been very valuable to learn from everybody's perspective. We're all passionate about these issues that are presented in the budget, and it's inevitable that sometimes people of goodwill with equal concern for the betterment of all of our children will have different perspectives on the best way to get there. And I think it's healthy. We've had a healthy exchange of views. I do want to comment very briefly on, as a number of commenters said, this is not an ideal process that we've been through. I think we all know that. We've all expressed that in one form or another. It's a process that we largely inherited. We've shared our frustrations. I won't go into all of those again, but I just want to reiterate my commitment to making sure, which I think we all share, that going forward into the next fiscal year, we intend to move much more deliberately with much more extensive, much earlier public consultations, much more public discussion among the board members, a much better framework for framing our discussions and our decisions, because we have been consumed over the past month and a half that we've been discussing the budget on this issue of stipend or pay raise and how much. And that's a very important issue for all the reasons that have been said. But it is, as the last commenter noted, there are a lot of other issues that are embedded in this budget where we should be having those discussions. We should be having a debate as a board whether we should have more travel budget available to magnet schools versus other schools. Maybe we need more professional development and more education and more training for the students who are in charge of teaching our most economically disadvantaged students. That's a discussion that we should have, a debate we should have as a board, and we have not had the opportunity to have that discussion. It's not been framed in a way that allowed us to have that discussion. And so going forward after this, I will be, strongly in favor of making sure that we have a process that allows us to have that discussion, appropriate timeline. That said, we are where we are. There's a world of pain that comes if we don't get a budget approved by the end of July. And so that's why, even though I have significant concerns over the process, significant concerns over our inability to debate a number of things that we should debate, I think it's important that we go ahead and vote for this and make this selection tonight and then get to a vote at the end of July. Thank you.
Thank you, School Member Patrick Martin, and I also feel your same sentiments. I won't be the dead horse. I think everybody feels the same way, that this budget process could have been run a lot smoother. But as we said, moving forward, progress monitoring our budget on a month-by-month basis gets us to a better place. But not only that, I think that we need to also, in the coming months, maybe coming weeks, we have to strongly consider going back to standing committees, because what that's going to do is going to help us to differentiate a lot of these issues out in a time and a space that allows the community to thoroughly vet what is happening, and also our board as well as our personnel and our staff. So I'll just stop there. Madam Secretary, seeing no other names inside of the queue, please call for the vote. We are now voting on the original item to select budget proposal 4B as our general fund budget, and item 4A as our special revenue budget.
Please vote. The motion carries.
Thank you. Moving right along, we are moving on to item B2, professional service contracts, Empower. This is a consideration of a request for the approval of the professional service contracts between the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board and the following. A, Empower Schools in the amount of $49,500 to provide support and resources to Helix Charter School for the implementation and phase of the Imagine Grant. B, Empower Schools in the amount of $80,000 to provide support and resources to Capitol High for the implementation phase of the Imagine Grant. C, Empower Schools in the amount of $80,000 to provide support and resources to Baton Rouge Flame for the implementation and phase of the Reimagine Grant. D, Empower Schools in the amount of $80,000 to provide support and resources to Baton Rouge Visual and Performing Arts for the implementation phase of the Reimagine Grant. Strategic alignment, student achievement, funding source, ESSER 3, incentive, Imagine Grant. Can I get a motion? Moved by School Board Member Mark Ballou, seconded by School Board Member Ms. Shoshone Stewart. All right, this time I'll come to our board for public comment. Okay, School Board Member Cliff Lewis, you're in the queue.
How are these schools, these the only schools who applied for the Reimagine Grant? Or were these the only ones that were awarded?
Ms. Dr. Bethley.
Hey, Dr.
Yes, sir. The district applied for these grants.
Right.
For Baton Rouge Visual and Performing Arts, for Flame. Helix applied for the grant themselves, but the funding flows through our district.
Okay.
And Capitol High, we applied for that grant as well.
Okay, and these.
So, Mr. Lewis, if I could just see if I could answer the question. In the grant, make sure I'm correct on this, Dr. Bethley, they wanted to, for you to choose schools that were highly requested, highly performing. That was a part of their grant. And so that's how we ended up putting in, and schools that also had high demand, I think was one of the pieces. So that's why we ended up doing those schools. And then for Helix, that was kind of done directly through the state.
Helix. Yes, sir.
That's correct.
So high-performing schools.
Well, for schools that were doing had innovative programs, and that were, yes, sir, highly effective.
Okay, I would sure like to see schools like Capital Middle and some of those schools awarded grants and counted some kind of way, because the rich keep getting richer, and I'll just put it like this. I said this a long time ago. The East Baton Rouge Parish School District is one school district with two separate school systems. Someone already commented on that dichotomy tonight when they talked about magnets and other schools. I mean, let's work for everybody. And I know I'm not picking on you. I'm not fussing. I'm just saying, the schools who really need it sometimes, kind of like we just kind of get left out, or they get left out. Capital Middle is where my heart lies. My experiences at Capital Middle is why I'm up here. Is why I decided to stay in education for 15 years. And I think those people, those kids at Capital Middle need the same type of attention that the kids at some other schools are getting. So if I have to go over there and help them get it done, I guess I'll go help them get it done. But there's no reason that school should not be thriving like all the rest of them.
Is that our coach? Yeah. All right, thank you, Coach Lewis. Next in the queue, we have School Board Member Patrick Martin.
Thank you. This is not the first time we've had the discussion and expressed the concern that Coach Lewis has just made, right? One of the very first items that came up when I joined the board in January or February, there were art enrichment grants that were going to many of these same schools. And on the one hand, we have a magnet system and we're providing that. On the other hand, many of us expressed concern at that time that as Coach Lewis puts it, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. this is part of my frustration with the budget process, right? At some point, it's incumbent upon us as board members to decide strategically, do we want to target these grants to improve the performance of our highest performing schools? Or do we want to target grants like this to improve the performance of our lowest performing schools that are filled with the students that need the most help from us, right? And we have not been given an opportunity to express our opinion through the budget process or somehow, some other way to say, this is in general, this is the direction we want to go in, right? And so I think at some point in the very near future, we have to start having processes and mechanisms in place. So we're not voting for this contract or that contract. We are voting collectively for how we want to allocate our resources, right? That fundamentally, as a board, our job is to decide how to allocate resources and in what manner. And I don't think we're doing a very good job of that. And so I think that I would encourage the superintendent to work very hard with us to figure out a way to start posturing this so that we can make, based on the input that we get from our constituents, decisions, strategic level decisions that we need to be making. Thank you.
And I would like to say that we did have other schools included in the request, but the State Department selected these schools. And this is the implementation phase. Last year we did the planning phase. So we have a rubric that we have to follow, and that's why these contracts are presented to you. And they're, as you can see, there are different amounts. That's because the schools are receiving a different amount of the funding.
Thank you. That's helpful context. I appreciate it.
I was just going to add, Board Member, I 100% agree. Just to give you context, when we were going after this with the last board, that was when the Empower grant, they just had we went through a process of same type of discussion. But I look forward to with this board's direction on that.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent. And look, and I understand, and we've talked before about the sometimes bind that we're in when dealing with the state, who have their own criteria and their own priorities for these things, right? And we don't want to leave money on the table. And if the table is set by the state only for that, then we have to talk to our elected officials at the Bessie board, not us poor school board members. And so, but that's a different, but I need to know that so we can have that conversation.
I think that is the most truest statement that you just said.
Is that all, School Board Member Martin? Okay. Next in the queue, we have School Board Member Mark Ballou.
Thank you. And Dr. Bethley, from what I recall about the Reimagine grant, the purpose of it was that the state wanted to identify innovative programs that had been successful and were in high demand.
Yes, sir.
And this would allow districts to expand opportunity for additional students so you could expand the programs. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
It wasn't necessarily to improve the performance. It was to expand the program so that people who were on the waiting list there would be other students that could take advantage of the programs that have been successful.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Like for Flame, we're adding 4 additional pre-K classes. For Baton Rouge Visual and Performing Arts, we are providing additional arts classes like music, French, Spanish, things like that.
All right. Well, thank you.
Is that all, School Board Member Mark Ballou? Yes. Okay. Seeing no other names in the queue at this time, we'll now go to our public. Ms. Tanja McMillan.
Tanya McMillan, parent of a child here in EBR schools. I was on my way out, and then I heard y'all talking about Baton Rouge Flame and this grant. And I said, let me turn back in there. And then when School Board Member Patrick Martin said that we needed to have more discussion and all this, it brought me back to the fact that that grant required those stakeholder meetings. There should have been a stakeholder meeting in the phase 1 planning phase of it, so you should have been able to have the input that you wanted. I don't know if y'all got it. You're a school board member. You didn't get your opinion heard. I definitely didn't get mine heard. And there was different ways to qualify for that grant. You could have expanded grades. You could have provided wraparound services for the community. There was different ways to qualify for that grant. And in phase 1, because there was a public records request for the grant itself, and I read it. In phase one, when we secured the grant, we talked about adding 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. All of a sudden, it was pre-K and kindergarten. There was no discussion with stakeholders before that. Last time I said that, Mr. Ballou tried to make me out to be a liar. And I sent proof to several board members about the questions and the concerns of the people at Flame, the parents at Flame, who are asking, when are those stakeholder meetings? When are those stakeholder meetings? I didn't get an apology from him. I don't lie. We didn't have an opinion. We didn't have an opinion. That money could have been used for a lot more things, even at those schools, but nobody heard us. So I support you, Mr. Martin, in wanting a more transparent process, because we need it. I don't know why it was steamrolled through the way that it was. I don't know what the underlying objective is, but they always say follow the money. I'm just the parent, and I'm gonna look for it. And I'm not gonna be afraid to say what it is. So just do better. Check your people you're supposed to check, and represent those you're elected to represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McMillan. Next we have Ms. Fairley Jackson.
Wow. This grant and this contract is problematic. This administration told the board members and the community again today that this grant could only go to existing high-performing schools, and that is not the case. In fact, there were actually 10 action opportunities for this grant. Our administration chose to expand high-performing magnet schools by adding grades, received pushbacks from former board members and the community concerned about the impact on existing middle schools. A board member then went back as Plan B to say that the compromise was to add seats at these existing high-performing magnet schools. A board member here defended this in private conversation with me, saying it was about equity. This is not about equity. When the process for gaining a seat at a magnet school has not become more equitable and is based on a random lottery system, in addition to other barriers to entry, that's not equity. The most disturbing issue here is that there were options for funding that were about equity. There were 10 options. The most important one was wraparound services, a wraparound model. A school system completely redesigns a school or a set of schools by providing and coordinating wraparound services to students and families in collaboration with community organizations such as a vision clinic, a mental health service center, and a food pantry, in addition to improvements to the academic experience for students. That's from the LDOE website. This wraparound model aligns with the community schools model that has been presented to this board by board members and community members again and again. And the reason for not implementing that community schools model was funding. We had funding. We had hundreds of thousands of dollars of funding to do this, to support our neighborhood schools, to not focus on closing schools and consolidating schools, but actually supporting them. Instead, we didn't do that, and our board members were misled. Helix actually applied for this. I applaud them. Y'all, this is such an important thing. To even vote on this, we are so far down the line. I know it's too late. I don't know what to tell you about this vote. There's no way that I could vote for this in good conscience. I mean, Mr. Martin, you brought up some good points. There were so many options out there to help our neighborhood schools. We're talking $600,000 per school. We asked for $40,000 per school for a community schools model. That's wild. Former board members said to me that they felt sick when they learned that these were options, because they weren't told this. They were told that the LDOE, they were told by this administration that the LDOE told them this was the option. There were 10. There were 10 options, y'all. Please do better. Please, you're underpaid. I know that. You're overworked, but you need the information. Please do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Seeing no other names seeing no other cue cards at this time, We'll come back to our board, and I think I'm the only person inside of the queue. I'll be really quick. I would like to offer up a substitute motion. Reverse. I would like to offer a friendly amendment that we move this without recommendation to our regular board meeting next week.
You don't have any explanation for why you want to do that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I want to do it because hearing some of these concerns, and it does beg the question that we need some clarity around a lot of what's happening with this particular item. So that's why I wanted to offer it up. It gives us enough time to talk to staff, talk to personnel, and figure out if there's any changes or modifications that we can make.
Is there a time limit on I don't mind.
It would only be 1 week.
Is it on? Okay. So we finished the planning stage of this grant. So we were approved for the implementation phase. So this is the implementation phase. So we are entering into contracts with your approval with Empower because that's a part of the implementation stage. And their responsibility is to service these 4 schools in providing technical assistance to them, supporting them, monitoring to see what they're doing that's in the grant. That is their responsibility. And we have to pay them in 4 phases. Like the first phase is due to them in August. That's 50% of the contract. Then we pay 25%. Then at the end, May and June, we pay the last 25%. So
if we pushed it 1 week, would that hinder the ability to have to pay any of these?
No, sir.
Okay. That's the biggest question that I was trying to ask,
okay.
Dr. Bethley.
Okay.
Mr. President, point of order, just so I understand the ramifications of whether this friendly amendment's adopted or your substitute motion or whatever. Either way, either we vote in favor of the original motion and then the committee has officially recommended the board's officially recommended that we consider it next week, right? Because this is not up for final adoption today, right? That we still have to have a vote next week as part of the consent agenda, or it can be pulled from the consent agenda, right? And so this is not final approval tonight, one way or the other.
Right, that's absolutely correct.
No, just a point of order. This is not a committee of the whole. This is an actual special meeting, so this is final approval.
Well, thank you. That's the council. Can you opine?
Yeah, so as a special meeting, this is a special meeting agenda, not a cow. So unless the motion of the maker's motion specifies sending it to the consent agenda for the regular meeting of this month, it's a final approval. So Mr. Blue would need to specify that. I think his understanding and his expectation was final approval for the night.
I'd like to wait for a week. I think we're better off that way.
Correct, which is why I didn't offer it as a sub and rather as a friendly. And as Dr. Bethley said, it wouldn't hurt us if we did wait a week. But it's completely up to the maker and the.
Only reason I'm considering is I'm worried that it wouldn't pass, then we'd have to wait 60 days to hear it again. Is that correct?
If the item fails tonight, yes, that's correct. Yes, that's a process that would have to occur after this meeting, but correct.
I mean, this is a grant we've already received, and this is just implementing. We can't change the grant. I don't know what we're going to accomplish by moving it a week. I mean, I guess I'm hesitant to not accept it because I'm worried. Actually, why don't you just make a substitute, and we'll see if that. If you want to do that, I'd rather go that route.
Are any questions that the board may have? If you send them to me, I will respond to them. because in order for us to get to the implementation phase, we had to have the meetings, and I have all the documentation for the meetings that we've had, and I can make that available to you.
And that's understandable. The idea of doing that, though, was to get an understanding of the process so that everybody has a clear and concise understanding of how we are at this point and stage that we're at now. There are a lot of questions and concerns on the table. So that's why, again, I offered the friendly so we can at least get some answers and questions around that. And if at the very least, we can change the process moving forward, I think that that's worth that. But again, if the maker and the second of the motion don't think that the friendly is worthy, that's okay. I'm not. Okay. All right. Next in the queue, we have School Board Member Michael Godet.
I will be very brief. I just want to move on because if we keep passing these things down, we just end up blocking up all of our agendas and working through that. Again, if we want to look at the process, we can do that. But let's get on and get some things done so we can continue moving. Again, this has been discussed and discussed and discussed in multiple meetings. I have a little different representation of the process that was happened. I got in trouble last time for saying that, but I think all of the things that I said were factually correct. And so I would like to just see us get on with life. And next time these come up, we can change and what we do. But to keep rehashing the same thing, this would be like the 5th or 6th meeting that this has been done, because this went through 2 committee of the wholes and all sorts of things when it was originally passed. So it has had lots of public input. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Coach Lewis.
That was an accident in my hand. I didn't mean that. He's got tremors. Yeah, I'm having tremors over here.
I'm about to send you home, Coach. I'm about to send you home. All right, Coach. All right, next in the queue, we have School Board Member Patrick Martin.
Is this mic on?
Right.
I'm sorry. I apologize. No,
Too early.
But seriously, I, on the one hand, I agree with my colleague, Mr. Godet. We're sort of beating a dead horse on this issue at this point. However, as the person who made the motion last week to continue, to move this to the board meeting, the committee of a whole on this particular item, yes, there's been a lot of discussion of these grants, and they've been prior last year with the prior board and whatnot, may have done all these things. But this particular agenda item didn't get heard in the committee of the whole because we ran out of time, right? And so I don't think that we're harmed by taking another week to allow. We've been doing that a lot, probably much more than we should. But I will defer to the president whether he wanted to make that a substitute motion or just let it go ahead and get voted tonight.
No, for the sake of it, just doing a substitute motion only to see it die, I don't think that that's adequate amount of or effective amount of our time.
I will reluctantly, vote in favor of this because, we're not going to turn down money at this point.
Correct.
We're too late in the process, so I'll vote for this. But it's adding one more thing to a very long list of items that I feel like I've had no choice but to vote for because they've already been in motion or were not adequately vetted prior to that. And with that said, I'm going to vote for it. Thank you.
And I duly and strongly take that into consideration, by the way. Okay, seeing no other names inside of the queue. At this time now, we go to Madam Secretary. Please call for the vote.
Please vote. The motion carries.
Thank you. Moving right along. Item B3, professional service contract. Volunteers and public school VIPs. Consideration of a request for the approval of a professional service contract between the East Baton Rouge Parish School System and Volunteers in Public Schools in the amount of $25,000 and $58,000 respectively for the Everybody Reads and Everyone Counts programs. Funding source, Title I and General Fund. Can I get a motion? Moved by Coach Lewis. Seconded by Vice President Carla Powell Lewis. Okay, at this time now, we go to our board.
And this is a motion for final approval. Just want to make sure that's
Yes.
for the record.
Everything we vote on tonight is a motion for final approval. Thank you, council. Unless specified otherwise. Thank you, council. Okay, seeing no names inside of the queue on behalf of our board, it's time now. We'll turn to the general public. Seeing no cue cards at this time, we'll come back to our board. Okay. Seeing no names out of the queue, Madam Secretary, please call for a vote.
Please vote. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. At this time now, we'll move right along. Item B4, Louisiana Compliance Questionnaire, consideration of a request for the approval of the Louisiana Compliance Questionnaire as required for the 2022-2023 financial audit of the East Baton Rouge Parish School System. Can I get a motion? Moved by School Board Member Shoshone Stewart, seconded by School Board Member Patrick Martin. This time now, we will turn to our board for comments. Seeing no names inside of the queue, we will now go to public comment. Seeing no cue cards at this time, we'll come back to our board. Seeing no names inside of the queue, Madam Secretary, please call for the vote.
Please vote. The motion carries.
Thank you. Moving right along, option B5, litigation, consideration of a request for the approval of the recommendation from Gwen Shamlin, General Counsel, East Baton Rouge Parish School Board, in the matter of Shanika Hopkins versus Michelle Stevenson, East Baton Rouge Parish School Board, and ACB Insurance Company, suit number 719043, Section 25, 19th Judicial Court, East Baton Rouge Parish, to provide the related matters. Can I get a motion? Moved by School Board Member Michael Gode. Can I get a second? Seconded by School Board Member Shoshone Stewart. Okay, it's time now. We'll go to our board for comment. Seeing no names inside of the queue, we will go to the general public. Seeing no cue cards at this time, we will come back to our board. Seeing no names inside of the queue at this time, Madam Secretary, please call for the vote.
Please vote. The motion carries.
Thank you. Moving right along to item C1, announcement of meetings. 1, Accelerating Board Capacity Institute to be held July 16th, July 19th, 2023 at Harvard University. Summer, all board members may attend. Regular board meeting to be held July 20th, 2023 at 5 p.m. in the Central Office Boardroom. Board workshop to be held July 22nd, 2023 from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Executive Center. Some or all board members may attend. Public hearing. Board workshop held on July 31st, 2023 at 5 p.m. in the Central Office Boardroom. Special meeting to be held on July 31st, 2023, immediately following the public hearing board workshop in the Central Office Boardroom. Committee of the Whole to be held August 3rd, 2023 at 5 p.m. in the Central Office Boardroom. School Board Member Gode, please. Meeting adjourned.